Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. What if I told you there's a bill in Congress that could completely eliminate estate taxes as well as generation skipping transfer taxes forever? It's called the Death Tax Repeal Act of 2025, and while it hasn't passed yet, it has some serious momentum. If you care about legacy planning, transferring wealth to the next generation, or just staying ahead of major tax changes, this is one you're going to want to understand. Let's walk through what's in the bill, what it means for your estate plan, and how it could reshape how wealth is transferred in America. The Death Tax Repeal Act of 2025 was introduced in both chambers of Congress this February. Right now, it's gained significant Republican support, 45 co-sponsors in the Senate and 179 in the House, but it hasn't moved beyond the committee stage yet. It's still very much alive, but there's no guarantee that it's going to pass, and we would need 60 votes in the Senate to overcome any sort of filibuster, so it still has a long road ahead of it. Here's a breakdown of what the bill proposes. First and foremost, the repeal of the federal estate tax and generation skipping transfer tax. Let's talk about what this really means because this is a game changer. First, the estate tax, sometimes called the death tax, only applies to very large estates. For 2025, that means anything above $13.99 million for an individual or just under $28 million for a married couple. If your estate is under those numbers, you pay nothing in tax, well, at least at the federal level. But if it's above those numbers, you get hit with a hefty 40% tax. But what if the Death Tax Repeal Act passes? Well, then there would be no taxes owed. It doesn't matter if your estate is worth $15 million, $50 million, or more, there would be no taxes at the federal level ever again. Now here's where this bill goes even further. The bill also wipes out the generation skipping transfer tax, or GST tax. This is a special 40% tax that applies if you leave assets to your grandchildren or anyone more than one generation below you. Why does this tax even exist? Well, it was done to close a loophole because in order to avoid estate taxes, families could have otherwise just skipped over their children and left everything to their grandkids and not had to pay any estate taxes. With the GST tax gone, you could pass wealth directly to grandchildren, great-grandchildren, or even future generations without facing that extra layer of taxation. So in plain English, if this bill passes, the federal government effectively steps out of the business of taxing inherited wealth. So whether your estate is 1 million or 100 million, there's no estate tax on the federal level and no GST tax on the federal level ever again. This could be a massive shift in how generational wealth is transferred in America. And if you're someone with a high net worth estate, this could mean you get to pass on millions tax-free. Now you might be wondering, what about the gift tax? Well, that's actually sticking around, but with a bit of a makeover. First, the top rate would drop from 40% down to 35%. So if you're making very large gifts above the exemption, you'd owe a bit less in taxes. Second, the lifetime gift tax exemption would be set at $10 million, but that number does grow with inflation. For 2025, that means you could actually give away just under $14 million over your lifetime before any federal gift tax would apply. So you'd still be able to pass on a lot of wealth tax-free, although the limits would be slightly lower than what they are today. But here's the thing. If Congress doesn't act, by the end of 2025, current tax laws are set to expire, at which point the amount that you're able to pass on tax-free would drop way down to around $5 to $6 million per person. Still a lot of wealth that you could transfer on tax-free, but significantly lower than what those limits are set at today. So those who are planning on passing on a lot of wealth are hoping to see some sort of extension here. Without any sort of adjustment or extensions, amounts beyond these limits would be taxed at 40%. That's why these changes matter so much. Depending on what Congress does, it's going to determine how much wealth gets to pass on tax-free. Here's something that didn't change, the step-up in basis. This means when heirs inherit assets, they get a cost basis adjustment up to fair market value at the time of death. Let's say your dad bought a rental property for $200,000, but let's say now it's worth $1 million and he passes away. You inherit it at $1 million, and if you sell it immediately, you don't pay anything in capital gains taxes. This rule staying around is huge. It is one of the most powerful tools in legacy planning. Right now, if a U.S. citizen leaves assets to a spouse who isn't a U.S. citizen, those assets go into a special trust called a qualified domestic trust. Right now, this is the only way to delay paying estate taxes when the surviving spouse isn't a citizen. But if the Death Tax Repeal Act passes, this would effectively eliminate estate taxes, so these trusts wouldn't be needed for this purpose anymore. But for families who already have these trusts in place, the bill offers a 10-year transition period. This gives them plenty of time to restructure or redistribute assets under tax-free rules and without feeling like they are forced into making quick decisions. Here's one for advanced planners. Some people use special trusts called incomplete gift non-grantor trusts to move money to states with lower taxes. And up until now, they didn't have to pay gift taxes when they did this. However, in the Senate's version of this bill, any money that's moved into one of these trusts is treated as a taxable gift right away. So this won't work in the future going forward if this bill passes as a way to avoid paying taxes. Let's walk through a real-life example so you can see just how big some of these changes could be. Imagine Maria, who has an estate worth $30 million, and let's say she wants to leave $15 million directly to her daughter and $15 million to her granddaughter. The $15 million gift to Maria's daughter is covered by her $13.99 million estate and gift tax exemption. This means the first $13.99 million is not taxed. The remaining $1.01 million above the exemption would be subject to the estate or gift tax, which can be up to 40%. Since the $15 million that's going to her granddaughter is a generation skipping transfer, that is not only going to be subject to the estate tax or the gift tax above and beyond the limit, it's also going to trigger the generation skipping transfer tax. For the first $13.99 million, this portion of the gift is covered by both the estate and gift tax exemptions, and the generation skipping transfer tax exemption, meaning no taxes are due on this amount. The remaining $1.01 million, well, this part is going to be hit hard. This part is subject to both gift tax and the generation skipping transfer tax, meaning Maria could owe up to 40% on the first $1.01 million, and also this portion could be subject to an additional 40% gift skipping transfer tax. But if the Death Tax Repeal Act passes, things could change significantly. Maria could leave the entire $30 million to whomever she wants in her family without having to pay anything to the IRS. She could leave that $15 million directly to her granddaughter without triggering any estate tax or any generational skipping transfer tax. So in this situation, with this example, this could result in over a 7-figure tax savings. So if this bill passes, what would have otherwise been a significant tax bill, Maria's family wouldn't have to pay anything to the IRS. Now, of course, there are ways you can get creative in how things are passed, and you don't have to trigger generation skipping transfer tax, and you can use different accounts. Talk to an estate planning attorney. But I just wanted to illustrate how this bill could have an impact in simple transfers. One area that stands to benefit dramatically from the Death Tax Repeal Act is family-owned businesses, especially in those industries like real estate, where property values can be quite high, but cash flow might not be enough to cover estate tax obligations. Under current law, imagine a family-owned real estate business worth, say, $15 million. The property holdings are valuable, but the business doesn't generate enough liquid cash flow to cover the federal estate tax when the owner passes away. If the estate exceeds certain thresholds, the family might be forced into selling a portion of the property or a portion of the business just to cover the estate tax bill. And this is often the case when a significant amount of inheritance comes through property or land, and there isn't a lot of cash sitting ready to cover this bill. If there's a repeal with the estate tax eliminated, the family can simply pass down the entire real estate portfolio to the next generation, tax-free. The heirs would no longer have to sell off a portion of the business or to sell certain properties in order to cover any federal tax bill. So the family gets to keep their entire legacy intact and keep this wealth generation going. This could be a complete game changer for farming families or for families with big real estate holdings, allowing them to keep their properties and their portfolios intact for generations to come without having to face any sort of estate tax bill at the federal level. While the repeal of the estate and GST taxes is a win for high net worth individuals, it may also lead to even greater wealth concentration among the wealthiest families. Critics argue that this could widen the wealth gap, as it could allow multi-million-dollar estates to be passed down from generation to generation without any sort of tax consequence, and it can further concentrate the wealth to the hands of a few across multiple generations. It's important to consider how this shift would impact wealth inequality and how this shift might hinder or benefit society at large in the long term. So where does the bill go from here? Right now, it's sitting in committees in both the House and the Senate. As it moves forward, it's likely to go through intense debate, especially as we go into 2026, with the sunset of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act estate exemption coming up. And remember, just because a bill has momentum certainly doesn't mean anything is guaranteed. Things can change fast, and it can certainly get stalled in a committee. Remember, lawmakers can always negotiate adjustments and extensions, but one thing's for certain, as we gear up for one of the largest wealth transfers in history, there's no doubt about it, this is not going to be a quiet debate. And one thing to keep in mind as we go forward, while the federal estate tax could be repealed, many states still have their own estate or inheritance taxes. So don't assume that you're completely free of estate taxes. If this does pass, you still have to check with your own state on what your obligations might be. This bill could certainly reshape how estate planning is done for years to come, but it's certainly not a law yet. And if you're in a position where you would be affected by any of these changes, now's a great time to meet with your financial advisor or your estate planning attorney and go over how this might impact you. No matter what happens next, staying informed is probably one of the best pieces of a financial strategy. So let me know, is this something you're keeping your eyes on? Share your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. Hopefully, I turned autofocus off, so there were a couple videos where it was just nonstop. So hopefully, right, there's no autofocus happening. It's just nonstop, right? No, that is autofocusing. What the fuck? Listen, you know, my skill set is not camera operation. This YouTube channel is really flying by the seat of my pants here. Let's try it. I'll get better lighting in a week or so. I've got to order lights. Bear with me. We're working on it. Well as generation skipping. Okay. I'm gonna have to put earplugs in to do this video. I can't do the noise. Okay. That fucking bird. I think he's gonna be in the background of my video, and I'm not happy about it. Where is that bird? Oh, no, no, sir. No, sir. No, sir. Get away from my window.